This evening is inspired by one man, Alain Bertaud. He and his wife, Marie-Agnès, a satellite image specialist, have worked for 50 cities around the world, leaving their mark on every one of them. Alain's first job was working for none other than Le Corbusier, the god of modernist planning, designing Chandigarh, the capital of Punjab. But it was as principal urban planner of the World Bank that he got to experience and observe the broad diversity of world cities. Lynn and I met with Alain and Marie-Agnès for a long lunch, and the time we spent with them was magical. We heard stories of so many cities and exotic places, trekking through deserts and jungles, laying out subdivisions, and immersing in different cultures, witnessing the transition of Russia and China from planned cities to market-based cities, not to mention having his appendix taken out without anesthesia. We learned especially that they were a team. This was not restless urban planner dragging reluctant wife and family around the world. If anything, Marie-Agnès was the one with the bags packed, ready to go, and wanting to get on the road, and they loved all their adventures. After almost 6 decades of being immersed in cities of every variety, Alain summarized his insights in an outstanding, internationally acclaimed book called Order Without Design. I contacted them about Vancouver. Vancouver is such a great city, but it has real problems, like affordability. One of the great curses that prevents us from solving our problems is that we keep winning awards. The best city of this or the best city of that. It makes it hard to convince people that we need to change, that we need advice. They agreed to come to Vancouver for a public salon and a series of workshops and gatherings. When our cher Marie-Agnès received a serious diagnosis and COVID raised another of its many heads, we decided the public salon would be a step in their journey to Vancouver. They would participate in the public salon on screen, and the workshops and gatherings would be this spring. They have made Vancouver their goal for healing. They have attended all 5 of our urban Zoom lunches with outstanding speakers like Nathaniel Lauster, Eric Villegomez, Gordon Price, Bruce Hayden, Oliver Hartleben, and we will continue our urban lunches. When they arrive next spring, we will present ideas for Metro Vancouver inspired by Alain's book, Order Without Design. Meanwhile, we will all be sending Marie-Agnès our most positive thoughts of strength and health. So let us begin with some initial insights from Alain Bertaud, based in New York City, who will be having a late night thanks to all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the big screen, Alain Bertaud.
I would like to start this talk by defining what I mean by markets. We are going to speak a lot about market, and I think that many people have different definition. For me, markets is a natural phenomenon. It's a bit like gravity. It is certainly not a god. It's not a religion. And it's not a moral rule or anything. This is just a natural phenomenon. And I think that many times markets produce interesting results and sometimes they don't. Depending on your opinion, you may want to reduce the importance of markets, especially in the outcome in cities, but Some people like me think that market have an interesting role to play, not everywhere, we will discuss that, but sometime. Now, whether your opinion is that market should be curbed or market should be encouraged, if you do not understand market, you are never going to achieve anything, including controlling markets. So, I compare markets sometimes to gravity. Gravity is everywhere. And if you want to beat gravity, like for instance, go into a balloon or, or build an airplane or an helicopter, you better understand how gravity works. Now, this is exactly the same thing for markets. So let us start with that after this warning. So for me, cities are labor markets. Now, a lot of people who like cities think that, the labor market, cities are much more than labor markets. There are many things we like in cities, which are different, which are, for instance, restaurant, a museum, concert hall, jogging along an avenue or a perspective, going on a picnic in a park. All these things are possible if labor markets are working well. If the labor market are the foundation of all the things we like in cities. If they don't work, all these things disappear. For instance, we have the recent example of Detroit, which labor market collapsed and everything that was, interesting in Detroit collapsed at the same time, including the museum and the music industry. So, what is important about those markets? First, market should, the word markets is important. Labor market means that anybody in a city or even in metropolitan area is able to select a job and the best job according to its skills. So the larger is the labor market, the more possibility of interesting job are there. At the same time, the possibility of changing job, this is very important. I learned that when I worked in Russia and in China, that before reform, most of the people there were allocated to a job and they stay in the same job or at least in the same industry all their life. And that, as you can imagine, created an enormous frustration. So this is how do those markets work? Well, first, you need, of course, a land use. And this land use, to me, is generated by spontaneous order. It is really firms and households who should be able to decide how much land they consume, how much floor space, and where. Now, in order to do that, they need an infrastructure, and infrastructure, especially large-scale infrastructure, are not created by markets. Infrastructure are designed from top down. If you design a subway system or a sewer system, it has to be designed by engineers. They have to take into account, the population and things like that, but it has to be top down. Now, for me, the role of planners is precisely to provide the infrastructure that the market will not provide, but in order to serve this spontaneous order where people locate and firms locate where they want. So the land use of a city must be driven by demand. It should not be, I don't believe, in spite of my education that they call the Beaux-Arts, I don't believe that there is an optimum design and that a genius designer can design a city and be optimum. I think that a city has to be designed by its inhabitants. Finally, I will start then looking a bit at some slides that I have borrowed from the previous Salon. So in particular, the slide of Jens and Nathanael and Julia and Eric. So this is a Google Earth image of Vancouver. Now, what's interesting with Vancouver is that it has, the CBD is eccentric. It's not in the center of the city the way it is in city like London, Paris, or Moscow. And most cities which are on the seaside, where are important ports, are usually like that. But what is interesting, I think, is an asset for Vancouver, is that it extends in a large grid. The entire metropolitan area is covered by a grid. That provides Vancouver with a possibility of mobility, which again will make the functioning of land market much better than cities like, again, Paris or London or Moscow, which have a radioconcentric system of road. The next thing are densities. And here I'm borrowing these 3D maps from Jens. And we see that there is a very high density in the CBD, as can be expected. But then we see that the pattern of density are kind of a little erratic. In particular, we see just to the south of the CBD that we have a drop of density, which to me is probably not, not driven by demand. It's driven by very rigid regulation. And I wonder if some of the problem of affordability in Vancouver are not really caused by some rigidities in the regulation. Now, I don't want to blame zoning for the high prices of Vancouver or any other cities. There is no silver bullet. High prices come from a lot of things which have to be reformed. It could be in the building industry. It could be in the way building permit is distributed. It could be because of uncertainty about decision about land use. It could be a lot of different things. Again, I am not, I'm not familiar with Vancouver, so I would certainly not give solution. So this is the map of the zoning. And again, I think there will be speaker here who will describe it and, much more knowledgeably than I can do it. Now, finally, when we are talking about affordability, we have to take into account the enormous difference between different households who are living in the city. So here I represent with data which were provided to me by Eric Villagomez, I represent the income distribution curve of Vancouver, and horizontally we have the income per year, and vertically we have the number of households. So every bar here represents the number of households within an income bracket. When we look at affordability, we do not have to say low income, medium income, or things like that. We have to look at every one of these little bar and ask ourselves, where can they find a house? Where can they, and how far is it from their job? If it is more than 1 hour, we have a big, big problem. And we should try as planners to design a transport system which serve the land use so that everybody in this income curve have an access to their job within less than 1 hour. Finally, it is true that if you look at the very low income, probably they will need some assistance to have a house. There might be even some who are homeless. It's clear that we have to take care of those people. But when I see, a city like New York, who now is starting subsidizing people who are at the 60th percentile of the income distribution, that means that we imply that 60% of the household of New York will require subsidy in order to afford housing. Then I think that we have the wrong system. We have to reform it. We cannot accept that. So that was my last slide, and I would now be very eager to listen to my colleagues from Vancouver, who will certainly have much more interesting and deep insight about the city and its problem than I have at this moment. Thank you very much.